Hello, all you nice people. Thank you for showing up today. Quick reminder that next week will be the final live broadcast of the year. We'll be taking off the last 2 weeks of the year. And then next year, we'll have a new format. Instead of broadcasting at the same time and day each week, we'll vary it according to inspiration. And we'll give people in different time zones a chance to hear the initial broadcast, so we'll flow with it. It'll be wonderful as well. Course in Miracles has lots of tips and instructions on how to be a miracle worker. And the interesting thing about the Course is that it defines everybody as a miracle worker. You would think that Jesus is a miracle worker, or Mother Teresa, or great saints and yogis perform tricks and siddhis and powers. And the Course says, no, it says everybody has not just the capacity, but the responsibility to be a miracle worker. So who and what is a miracle worker? Well, a miracle worker is anybody who achieves the shift in perception from fear to love. That's how a Course defines a miracle. And it doesn't depend on some physical manifestation, but it depends on a shift in consciousness. The Course says that when you drop into a love space, a trust space, a creativity space, a connected to spirit space, then the universe will take care of all the details. And if some amazing manifestation needs to happen, it will, without you sitting around figuring, how do I make this thing manifest? And if it doesn't happen, it's blessing anyway, because you've changed your mind. And how many times have we quoted the Course? It says, seek not to change your mind, but choose instead to change your mind about the world. So let me tell you a couple of times when miracles have happened as a result of me shifting my consciousness, and hopefully it'll inspire you to do the same. Many years ago, as a teenager, I adopted Orthodox Judaism as my spiritual path, and I became very strict, did all the rituals and the Sabbath and the kosher food and the whole deal. And after about 7 years, I got tired of it, and it didn't mean anything to me anymore. And I remember one night, it was a fast day, and you're supposed to not eat. And I was really hungry. And I sat there by myself thinking, why am I not eating? And the answer was, I was afraid God would punish me if I broke the fast rule. And then I had one of the most powerful realizations of my entire life. A voice came and said something like, fear is not really a good reason to do a religious act. And it's certainly not a reason to live your life. And in that moment, I made a conscious decision that if I could not participate in the religion from inspiration and joy and choice, it wasn't really worth it. So I did the bold act of eating a piece of cake. And that was the end of Judaism for me. I was 21-ish. I explored the spiritual path, and I studied with Christians and Buddhists and meditators, and it was like a whole new world for me. I left the religious path, which served me beautifully for those years, and I launched onto the spiritual path, which was for me was much wider. It changed my entire life. I started writing books and doing workshops, and that was the beginning of everything you see me doing these days, many years later. And I told that story at a retreat I did a couple of years ago. And there's a fellow in the audience named Ray. And at the end of the retreat, Ray came up to me and he held my hand, he shook my hand, he looked me in the eyes very beautifully, very sincerely, and he said, I just want to thank you for eating that piece of cake. That's all he said, but there was a code hidden in that text. And the code was two things. One is, by you following your spirit and choosing to live from love, not fear, you've inspired me to do the same. And the second was, wow, the spiritual path that act launched you on has really changed your life and changed many lives, including mine. So thank you for doing that act. And so Course in Miracles also tells us that when you perform a miracle, which means shifts from fear to love, that miracle ripples out and touches lots of people that you never even hear about. And so when I did an act of courage, that led to many things in my life that have rippled out and touched thousands or actually millions of people. And the same is true for you when you do your art or your music, or you do your writing, your journaling, or your mothering, your teaching, or massaging, or coaching, or seminar leading, whatever spirit guides you to do, you not only affect that person you're touching in front of you, but that person's going to go out and be a positive influence on everyone they touch. And the Course says you never really know how far a miracle goes when you perform it. It could touch millions of people, all because you made one choice for love and trust and connection instead of fear and doubt and separation. Now, sometimes miracles happen in kind of quirky, funny ways. Years ago, I was giving a lecture for a group in Pennsylvania. It was a very large group, and a lot of the people were healers and teachers. And I told this story about how I went into 7-Eleven. I bought a bag of potato chips, kind of related to the story, but not totally on point. And after I said that, in my mind, a voice said, "That was a silly story to tell. Why did you need to mention that?" It's like, it was irrelevant. But I went on with my lecture. At the end of the lecture, this fellow comes up to me who was a fairly well-known healer on the East Coast at that time. And he shook my hand. And he said, "I just want to thank you for talking about potato chips." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well," he says, I'm a health food freak. And sometimes I binge out of ice cream or something that's not on my diet." He says, "When I heard Alan Cohen, who I consider a great spiritual teacher, admitting that he ate potato chips, it gave me permission to have some junk food once in a while." I said, "I'm healed." It's kind of a funny way that it all manifested. But you never know why spirit gives an idea in your mind, especially if it's a surprise or a non sequitur idea. I was speaking with my dear friend Maria Manucherry, who's a wonderful healer and intuitive, and we're talking about how can you tell when real intuition is coming to you versus the ego or the intellect or fake intuition. And she said, one of the attributes of real intuition is it's often surprising, that some idea will pop into your head that has nothing to do with anything you've been thinking. You might actually think a thought you've never thought before. And this happens to me very often when I'm writing or speaking or coaching, but mostly writing. I get a stream of thought, and some of it is brand new to me. It's putting concepts together or a new word I've never used before. And I realize that spirit is feeding me a good idea to include in my writing. So if you're doing your artwork or music or dance or whatever, and some out of the blue concept comes to you, it is likely intuition, spirit speaking to you. And it's a good idea usually to act on it, because you're now setting a miracle up by you painting that picture and doing that music or teaching that course in a new way. You are being set up to contribute to the healing of many people who will hear you or see your work. And that blessing will ripple out and may touch thousands or millions that you never even hear about. Another instance was, I wrote my first book, The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And a publisher sent me a book to review and for my testimonial. And it was about a book who had been bullied by a woman who had been bullied as a child. And her mother was very seriously abusive. And this lady, as a young girl, had serious trauma as a result of this abuse by her mother. And eventually, as a young woman, she started to grow out of it. She found the spiritual path and started healing. And as I got to read through this book, I was reading on an airplane, she said, and then I found a book called The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore. my book. And she said, I went to a cabin in South Dakota, and I holed up and I did a personal retreat. And I read that book constantly. She said, it changed my entire life. And I'm sitting in this airplane reading about this lady who found her way to South Dakota with my book and changed her entire life. I just began to weep. It's just the connection of how you cast your bread upon the water and it touches people blew me away. And I felt so humbled to participate in that process. I had no idea. When I wrote that book, I was just doing it for fun. It was exciting. And let me share some ideas. I wasn't interested in becoming a bestseller, becoming rich and famous. That was not on my agenda. I just wanted to share my inspiration. I figured whatever happens to it, I published it myself, the first book. And whatever happens. It's in God's hands. I'm launching this and releasing it, and then the rest of it is up to God. And God sent it to this woman who really needed to read it. It changed her life. And by me reading that, it changed my life too, because I realized that a miracle is never lost. That's what A Course in Miracles says. It may go on to transform thousands of people you never know about. So we're living in a matrix. We're living in a mosaic of a universe that is so much more intelligent and impeccable than the little ego mind and intellect can orchestrate. It's, we're living in a universe of miracles. And when we do our part, God does his part. I'll tell you one more really fun story. See, I like to tell stories because they're real life situations, not just philosophies, not just theories, but these are things that happen to me. Great spiritual masters over the ages have told stories. Jesus and many yogis tell parables and stories about what happens to them in real life. And you can relate to them, you can chew on them because they're things that happen to you too in your own way. So at one time I was traveling from New York to Hawaii, and I had to change planes in San Francisco. And due to some reason, there was a delay, and the plane came in too late for me to make my connections to get to Hawaii the same day. And so the agent said, well, sorry, you got to find your way to a hotel. And I thought, well, aren't you supposed to take care of me? No, well, some rule, he quoted some rule. And they said, you got to get your own hotel. All right. So there was another guy at the desk standing next to me, and he was in the same situation. So I turned to him and I said something I probably wouldn't say today. So he looked like a nice guy, clean-cut guy. So I said, would you like to share a hotel room to mitigate the cost for both of us? And he thought for a moment. He said, yeah, okay. And I was kind of naive and trusting at that time. I don't know if I do that now, but I was blessed. I was protected. Anyway, we both went to this hotel room and we had our sleep, and I got up early, and we exchanged business cards the night before, and I left, and that was it. Well, about 15 or 20 years later, it was many, many years later, I get an email from this guy. He said, you may not remember me, but I did, of course. I remember the situation. And he said, we shared that room. And he said, I have to admit, I have to be honest, he said, I was a little nervous once we decided to do it. He said, I slept with my wallet in my pillow. Anyway, he said, I'm a counselor or a teacher at a facility for troubled teenagers. And he said, after I got your card, I looked on your website and I saw you had some books. So I ordered this book called Why Your Life Sucks and What You Can Do About It. I thought it might be good for my clients. And he said, that book has had a huge influence on so many of my students. He said, I buy lots of them and they read it. They're at the age where they can really relate to the concepts and the language. He says, I just want to thank you and bless you for really being a transformational agent on those students. I thought, wow, I had no idea when I was inviting him to share that room that would happen. I mean, and I thought it was silly because I thought, well, that was kind of was kind of being tightwad to not want to spend a whole wad on the hotel room myself. But you understand that there was a plan, that Spirit had a plan for that encounter that went far, 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 far beyond that momentary interaction. And so this is how Spirit works. Spirit creates miracles. Now, I'll tell you one more interesting thing about that book. So many years ago, I had a friend, and he was going through a downtime. And he said, why don't you write a book on why your life sucks? I thought it's a weird title. And so shortly thereafter, I met a publisher who wanted to publish something from me. She had read my other books and she wanted to publish something. And she said, well, what would you like to write? I just made a joke. I said, oh, a friend of mine said, why don't you write a book called Why Your Life Sucks? And she said, oh, that's a great title. I said, I want you to write that book. And I said, oh man, that's not a book I want to write. And in that moment, my life began to suck because it wasn't the title I wanted to get behind. But she really insisted. She said, I really want to give you a good advance and I'll give you a good promotional title. She said, I want that book. I thought, oh man, I don't want that book. But I went along with it. I figured, okay, maybe Spirit is guiding here. And I figured so I say about it's a very positive book, actually. It's about 10 reasons people's lives suck. And most important, what you can do to offset those 10 reasons. So I turned it into a fun, positive, creative, joyful project. It's not really what the title sounds like. The title is just a way to get your attention and then you read the positive book. And I often get emails from young people and folks who say that was one of their favorite book of mine. So once again, Spirit was working behind the scenes. When that fellow gave me that idea, and I just said the title to her very casually. I did not mean for her to want to write that book. But we're living in a universe that's much bigger than any of our little minds can understand. And when I say little mind, I mean that advisedly. There is a little mind that says, let me figure this thing out. And there's a big mind that lives in here that says, I know how to figure things out. And so when we drop into intuition, when we drop into the heart, when we drop into trust, then miracles happen, then synchronicities happen, and meetings happen, and timings happen, and relationships happen, and contracts happen, and career paths happen that go far beyond anything you and I can figure out. So this week, I would like you to think about what it means to be a miracle worker, and I would like you to practice being a miracle worker by, at the choice point of love and fear, choosing love, choosing the joy path instead of the resistance path, and watching what happens as a result. I promise you, God will take your creative, positive choices and turn them into miracles. That's my promise, not because I made up the rule, because that's just the way the universe works. And speaking of miracles, just want to remind you that our next holistic life coach training is starting in January. This will be an awesome life transforming course about how you can turn your life into miracles and how you can help other people turn their life into miracles. It's a 6-month intensive, very intimate course. I work with all the students very closely. And this one will be entirely online. There will not be an in-person retreat. So if travel is an issue for you, this will be the program. I don't know if we'll do it again entirely online. So go to my website, alancohen.com, and you can see where to apply. We have a couple spaces open before the new year starts. So thank you for joining. Okay, we always like to close with a moment of prayer and intention. I will speak the words of affirmation for you. And if you want to just sit with them or repeat them in your mind, please do. Thank you, Great Spirit, for giving me a world that will manifest my highest choices. Thank you for letting me serve as a miracle worker and where I can, lightening the load of other people. Thank you for connecting with me with people who I can help and who can help me. I now accept my role as a channel of divine energy. I don't just want to be a healer. I am a healer. Say that to yourself. If you have doubts or questions about being a healer, let them be wiped away at this moment. I am a healer. I am a teacher. I am a soother. I am a reliever of suffering, beginning with my own. I came to get free of pain and fear. I also came to help others get free of pain and fear. How blessed am I? How blessed are we all to be able to bring light to the darkness, love to the fear, soothing to the pain. This is my highest calling in life. I accept it now. Thank you, God. And so it is.